Alright guys, so in today's video we have something special. This is a bit of a collab video with my buddy Dave Maconi from the YouTube channel Brains and Gains, and we are going to be talking about gaining mistakes or bulking mistakes. We thought about doing a podcast episode on this where we go through a whole bunch of things, but we did a couple of podcast episodes already where we chat for an hour about a certain topic, and we already kind of addressed the topic of bulking, so we thought that this time we would be doing a shorter video. So we decided that we will address 6 points or 6 big mistakes that people commit to when they are trying to bulk up or go through a lean gaining phase. So I will be addressing 3 points and Dave will be addressing 3 points. 3 will be on this YouTube channel and 3 will be on Dave's YouTube channel. So after you watch the first 3 points here, go over to Dave's channel and you can watch the other 3 over there. This is a bit of a new setup that we're trying out. Let us know how you like this. And without further ado, let's get into the first point. So the first really critical mistake that I want to address here, I think you can already kind of predict what this is going to be, but that's okay. Some things you just need to hear again and again, and that is going for the dreamer bulk and way overdoing your calorie surplus. Now, why that is a problem, why it's a problem to go for a really massive surplus is, I think, fairly self-explanatory. You're going to gain a lot of body fat really quickly. Let's say you finish the cutting phase at 10, 12% body fat, and you're gonna be up at 15, 16, or 20% in no time. Now, is there a physiological problem with that, or your muscle gaining emissions going to be hindered if you go fat too quickly? Is there gonna be a problem with your insulin sensitivity or chronic inflammation levels or anything like that? That is debatable. There are some theories that suggest that there is a problem with that. There are some other theories and some anecdotal evidence that suggest that there isn't really a problem with that. But here's the thing, you're gonna want to be leaner anyway once you reach that body fat level. Most of you that are in the fitness and working out and eating healthy kind of game don't just want to perform well in the gym and move heavy weights around, but you also want to look a certain way. You wanna be comfortable when you take your shirt off. You wanna walk around lean and athletic. So it's pointless for me to go into details whether your insulin sensitivity is going to worsen your muscle building ambitions once you reach 20% body fat. The reality of the situation is that once you reach 20% body fat, you will want to cut anyway. So how about we try to reach that point as slowly as we can and milk every step of the way as you get from, say, 10% body fat up to 15% body fat or higher. And besides that, another problem with all of this is that if you go for this really massive surplus and you put on a lot of body fat quickly, and after that you either force yourself into a really long diet to get rid of all that fat or into a shorter but really harsh diet, you never actually get to enjoy yourself. Half of the time you're force feeding yourself and you're bloated and sweaty all the time and you're looking worse week to week. And in the other half of the time, you're starving and you're food obsessed and you're cutting calories super hard. So how about we try to go for a middle ground where you're in a small surplus for a long period of time, you actually get to enjoy your diet, and when the time comes to diet again, you don't have to murder yourself with a super long or a super harsh diet, and it's really not gonna be that big of a deal. You just have to spend a couple of weeks dieting back down, and then you're ready to bulk again for a long period of time. Now, to actually put some numbers to all of this and to quantify what I'm talking about here, how big your calorie surplus should be is really dependent on how much potential you still have to put on muscle. There are some estimations out there that suggest that to build and synthesize a pound of muscle tissue, it roughly requires 2,500 calories. So to build a pound of muscle in a month, that would mean a 2,500 calorie surplus distributed over the course of that 1 month. So if you can put on 2 pounds of muscle, which for the record is a shit ton of muscle, that would mean 25 pounds of muscle in a year. If you extrapolate that, that would mean a 5,000 calorie surplus for that entire month. Distribute that over an entire month, so divide that number by 30, that would mean 166 calories per day. Now, let's not be too anal, let's round it up to 200 calories, and let's be generous, let's overshoot that number rather than under, so let's make that 300 calories. So if you're relatively a novice lifter, you still have a lot of potential to put on muscle, that would mean that you're eating in a 300 calorie surplus every day. Now, from that naturally follows that as you become more advanced and your potential potential to put on muscle in any unit of time, per month, per year, that calorie surplus will only get smaller. So as you reach your intermediate stage, that might only be a 200 calorie surplus. For an advanced lifter, it might only be a 100 calorie surplus. Now, if you want to be a tad bit more assertive just in case, so maybe in theory, you would only need a 100 calorie surplus, but you're gonna eat in a 200 calorie surplus, or instead of a 300 calorie surplus, you wanna eat in a 500 calorie surplus. These things are negotiable and it's not gonna be a super big problem. But I think from this, it's clear to see that these 1,000 calorie surpluses, those need to be forgotten.
The next point I'm going to touch on is changing up your training too often. If you've watched the channel, you know I am a huge fan of consistency and getting stronger on major lifts over time. Now, I actually just had not really a debate, but a conversation with Dante Trudell from DC Training about this. And basically my thoughts are, changing exercises can be good. If you've maxed out an exercise over years and years, you might want to change it up. You might just stall out a given time and not be able to do the same exercise all the time. That's fine. I'm also not even saying you have to have the big three in your workout routine. I'm not saying you have to bench, squat, and deadlift. There are going to be certain exercises that really feel right for you. Find those for each muscle group and progress on those. If you have 2 to 3 big movements per muscle group and you get stronger on those over time, that is what is going to get you big, okay? So it might be a Smith incline bench. Some people love that. Other people might be a low incline dumbbell bench with a pause. Whatever it is, be consistent over time. And that includes with the routine, because if you're doing one routine that's super high frequency, and then you do another routine that's super high volume, and you do another routine that's super low reps and strength focused, if you're a beginner, you're going to gain strength, you're going to gain muscle, it doesn't really matter. But if you're in that intermediate phase, you want to make sure you're consistent because it gives you something to compare to. How do you know you are making progress if you're switching the variables all the time? You're going to be making progress in the gym because you're going to be getting used to the new setup, the new exercises. You're going to be making neurological adaptations that allow you to progress. But did you really gain muscle? Probably not if you're switching all those variables all the time. And to say, well, I'm just going to train to failure regardless. That can work. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of people who make a lot of progress just going in there and training hard. But at some point, you're going to want to make sure that you are stronger on key exercises over time by staying with the same routine or similar routines in similar formats over time. Again, just to be clear, I'm not saying don't change up your program or don't do different programs. I think you should. I've done everything that you could think of over the last 15 years. What I'm saying is that make sure that when you pick a program, do it for a long enough time. Make sure it's something that you believe in and do it long enough to really see progress. That is very important.
All right, so I think by now it is pretty clear that either going for the dreamer bulk or being super fat phobic and going for that ultra lean gaining approach is suboptimal. Now let's talk about how to actually do all of this in practice. And this brings me to the next big mistake that people make, and that is drastically changing up their food selection right as they enter a bulking phase. Now it can be a problem because if you go for super energy dense, super palatable foods right away as you enter a bulking phase, that will make it super easy to way overdo your calories. Now, I think all of this comes from a fundamental misestimation of just how much leniency is warranted when you enter a bulking phase compared to a cutting phase. So let's take a relatively classic example. Let's say you finished a cutting phase at 2,000 calories at say 12% body fat, and that 2,000 calorie intake was a 700 calorie deficit. Now, let's say you want to go from this into a 300 calorie surplus. So obviously it follows that you add back in 700 calories to reach maintenance, and you add an additional 300 calories on top of that to be in that 300 calorie surplus. So that is 1,000 calorie difference from your cutting intake to your bulking intake. Now, 1,000 calories, that's a lot of food, right? But if you actually distribute that over a couple of meals, say 3 to 5 meals that probably a lot of you will be eating, that is only 200 to 300 calories per meal. And that is just not a lot of food. Especially not a lot of food when we talk about freshly transitioning into a gaining phase, because probably a lot of you will be transitioning into a gaining phase after you finished cutting. Now, at that point, your appetite is super high, you're a bit more food focused than normally, you're more attentive to food cues, your hunger hormones are a bit all over the place. So if at this point you start loading up on all kinds of starchy, sugary, and super fatty foods that are not only more palatable and are just increasing the chances of you overeating, but are also super more energy dense, then it's really easy to overdo your calories super fast. So what I would suggest is to actually keep your food selection relatively the same, at least freshly into a gaining phase. Now later on, as your appetite normalizes, your hunger hormones get back to normal, your calories may have to increase over time due to adaptive thermogenesis. So over time, it will be more viable to include more of these higher energy density foods, and you can be a bit more haphazard with your veggie intake. And yes, after being in a calorie surplus for say 5-6 months, basically every single day, at that point, you might actually have more rice in your diet than you have vegetables. But if 2 weeks into a gaining phase, you're already not eating any salads and vegetables, then I'm starting to get worried. So I would say, to make things really practical and really safe, in the beginning, keep your food selection relatively speaking the same, just eat more of those same foods. So eat more veggies, eat more fruits, eat more lean protein, and probably at that point you will actually be super happy that you get to do that. You know that feeling when deep into a diet you go, man, if I could just have 2 apples as a dessert in this meal, or I could have another serving of chicken breast. It seems unlikely when you're bulking and you're not that interested in food, but when you're deep into a cutting phase, those foods just seem super appealing. So take advantage that you're in this super low threshold of enjoyment, and it's just super easy to make yourself more happy, quote unquote, with food, and just eat more of your cutting, boring foods, and you're going to be safe. Alright guys, so I hope you enjoyed these first 3 points that we addressed on the theme of mistakes that people do while they're trying to bulk up. Go over to Dave's channel over Brains and Gains and watch the other 3 points. I hope you liked this, and let us know how you liked this new unique type of format that we experimented with. At any rate, give the video a thumbs up, comment, ask questions, and of course subscribe for more content like this. And now head over to Dave's channel to finish this actual video. Alright guys, thanks for watching, and see you next time.